Welcome to the Knights of Awakening interview series. Today's video we talk about secrets of an immortal, and we conduct an interview with the author, Ben Abba. Ben Abba is a self-described modern-day Plato with an important story to tell. The story of a real man living among us who has seen nearly 2,800 years of history through his own eyes. Ben Abba grew up in a traditional household in Middle America, where he excelled in physics, mathematics, chemistry, biology, geography, history, and biblical studies. From his college years, he has gained extensive experience in computer and business security, which he uses to protect financial institutions' information and assets. Ben Abba is also a professional remote viewer, which we will share with you, the interview we conducted with him on that, in a later video. We hope you enjoy the story Ben Abba tells us about the 2,800-year-old man and the experiences that this man had throughout history. We ask Ben a lot of hard-hitting questions and get some very honest answers in return. If you like this video, please give it a like and subscribe at the end. We really do appreciate it.
Well, it's a great honor to be on your show this evening.
Same here. We're glad to have you.
It's great to have you on here. You got an interesting story, Mr. Abba. I'll tell you, we were talking about a little bit earlier how this kind of thing, not so much in the way that you present it, but people are really interested and really intrigued by age, and we always have been. I've never had anybody in my family that's lived past 85 or 86 years old or so. But in the news, we're hearing about all these folks that are turning 110, and it's a really big deal for people. But the story you have for us today is much, much larger in life than that, right?
Oh, yes. After I started doing a little digging around as well, I found out there's people living way, way beyond 110 years of age, and some actually living among us today.
Wow. So I want to, if you allow me to, let me give it just a little brief thing here about what kind of give folks kind of an idea where you're coming from, and then we'll go ahead and get into it. Does that sound all right?
Sounds great.
All right, everyone. Mr. Abba here is an experienced security consultant for various financial institutions. One day he decided to use his unique skills in finding fraudsters to locate the oldest people alive. Now, I can tell you, I don't do that kind of work per se, but the tools that he's using to locate these folks are very, very valid, very powerful tools. And it seems like he's been doing this for many years. So, guys, pay attention to what we're going to start talking about here. Basically, we're going to be talking about his upcoming book. Ben, has your book been published yet?
The one book that's been published is the one I co-authored with Dr. Wayne Dyer, called Wake Up Moments of Inspiration. And the forthcoming book is the one it's coming up, hopefully by Christmas. I'm hoping here.
Okay, good deal.
Was I wrong in thinking that you co-authored a book with Deepak Chopra?
Not Deepak Chopra, with Dr. Wayne Dyer.
Dr. Wayne Dyer. Okay. That's a misquote earlier then.
So we're going to be talking about secrets of an immortal, an eyewitness account of 2,800 years of history. That's a long time. I can't even count that high, I don't think.
Oh, I bet you could if you'd given a chance. It's quite a remarkable that we've got people actually living among us, many hundreds of years and even longer. And it was quite a journey to find these people, and actually it's quite a journey just to realize that they're out there and accept the possibility that they could actually exist and live among us today.
So maybe we can start off by telling us what urged you to make this search, to take this this journey to look for these folks. What kind of brought you to that?
Well, about in the early 90s, a coworker dropped off on my desk a tape called Dead Doctors Don't Lie. It's by Dr. Joel Walsh. I'm not sure if you heard of it or not, but Dr. Joel Walsh is a veterinarian who, as a hobby, was researching the obituaries of doctors and other caregivers, and he noticed a pattern that many of these people were dying at a younger age than the average American was. And so I started thinking to myself, well, if we shouldn't be modeling our lives after our doctors and caregivers, who should we be modeling our life after?
Right.
So I started looking at my family and friends and see who lived the 80s and 90s years of age. Started asking them questions: how do they do it? How do they survive? What was their secrets to living longer? And then I started doing a little research and found that there's people way beyond that on record that used to live among us and are still living among us today.
So before you started your search, how we had the Guinness Book of World Records and all that. What were What were some of the oldest people on the record then?
Well, one of the things you know about Guinness has got Jean Calment, and I think she's going to be replaced here shortly. Mm-hmm. She was at 122 years of age, and what I found was an old National Geographic on people living in the mountains of Russia, some of them up to 168 years of age, according to the National Geographic article. There was several people there that actually would remarry in the age of 100 and had a very long, healthy lives as well. So I started digging around on different research material and found there was lots of people all over history that have lived in the 150 to 250 years of age, with the oldest being a gentleman by the name of Lee Ching-young, who, according to the New York Times, died in 1933 at the ripe young age of 256 years of age. He was also researched by several other American and Canadian publications, and even though he's not in the Guinness Book of World Records, there's a lot of evidence that he did live that long.
So why do you think that is? I mean, why is there such a huge discrepancy? I mean, many of us, well, maybe I should take that back. I don't know how many people take, great stock in what the Guinness Book of World Records has to say, but why is there such a discrepancy?
Well, I think there's several things. Again, I'm kind of speculating here, but I believe, first off, they seem to only want people they can verify with the kind of records that they're looking for. So they're pretty much going to stick to like Americans or Europeans for as old as they can find. Obviously, there was some records about Lee Ching-young, because the New York Times researchers found those records and they, verified what they could find, and that's why they reported the story. But according to the Guinness Book of World Records, that wasn't good enough for them. So, there's also maybe some other nefarious reasons. I don't know if they don't want to promote long life, because if you notice in our society today, it's pretty much like a death or fear-oriented society. One of the greatest tools people have to control us is the fear of death. And so lots of our media, lots of our entertainments, all centers around death. And here we start talking about people living longer, living, 150, 250 years of age, that could basically collect enough Social Security to pay off all those debts we paid in our tax years, collect enough more money that we get money back from the government finally and get ahead. Those are kind of scary thoughts for some people that are in control. And it may be something to do with it. I'm just speculating, but I've always wondered if that was a part of it.
Sure. Well, there's definitely, political and financial reasons, behind what people would report, and reasons why, the United States, for example, doesn't use the story like you told of the Chinese man that was over 200 years old, because we don't have, documentation or whatever. So you went on your own quest to find people that were in advanced years, and what was the oldest person that you came in contact with?
Well, kind of briefly go over some of my research. Sure. Because of what I was finding on the internet and on my research, that there was people on record that were the Guinness World Book of Records didn't say existed, I figured, what if there's some people living among us that are just simply not in the media, not in our records, that Guinness Book has never heard of, or maybe they're trying to hide from being in the media. So I started digging around using my standard, somewhat detective tools as part of my business, my financial security business. And then I picked up a few advanced researching skills along the way and combined those two and realized there's about 25 people who I believe living among us today that are over 250 years of age. And of those people, there's about 3 or 4, I believe, over 1,000 years of age. And right now, I believe the oldest I could find is nearly 2,800 years of age living among us today.
So I was just kind of curious on my own, what kind of regions or what kind of areas do these people live in? I mean, is there a certain link to maybe environmental issues or something that's, I mean, are these people centered around the same types of areas, or, I mean, are they kind of spread out?
The coral, calcium, there's some what was that chemical in fish, they say, the beta-carotene and something else.
Omega oils?
Yeah, is it anything locally? Does it have anything to do with the geography of it, or is it just widespread or something?
Well, that's what I was kind of that's part of the quest, and this was basically a personal quest to start off with, was to find out what these people were doing. Were they living? Is it something in their diet? Is their lifestyles? And a majority of them I could find were like in the Asia area, like China, India, the Tibetan Mountains. They were all lived in communities, but like these small communities, except for the eldest gentleman. He lives in an urban area, and he spent most of his life around the Mediterranean Sea. And this was the particular gentleman that I decided to target and find out more information from. And yes, there's quite a bit of information about how he extended his life, and we'll go over some of that this evening, I hope.
Wow. Just hearing you talk, I mean, this is like, it just takes me back to my old days when I was in Bible school, and you hear about these folks that lived for hundreds of years, and it's just kind of amazing to me. I'm not one of those people that are afraid of death. I know I'm going to live on whether my body does or not, but it just really intrigues me how folks can maintain this fleshy part of themselves for so long.
Oh yes, and what I was interested in, again, we all have the beliefs and we all have the knowledge of the spirit continuing on, but the option of extending our physical life on this planet, past 100 years of age, and living it in a quality of life. I don't want to live past 100 years of age, hooked up to basically, life support systems the rest of my life. I don't want to be a vegetable somewhere. I'd like to have a long, healthy, and quality life. So that's why I went looking for these people. I have a background in science. I have a background in financial security and finding people, and in particular fraudsters, identity theft, and that kind of things. So I put all those all that together and went looking to see what I could find and get some information from them that helped me to extend my life. And as I started incorporating it into my life, I'm noticing subtle changes take place. And yeah, I believe it does make a difference to all of us.
So, in your book, Secrets of an Immortal, I'm under the understanding that you've met a man that's almost 2,800 years old.
Correct. I've successfully located, made contact with, and interviewed a gentleman that's nearly 2,800 years of age, living among us today around the Mediterranean Sea.
Wow. Is he immortal, or does he look spooky like he's still 25, or does he look like an old person, or will he live forever? Will he ever die?
Well, first off, my definition of an immortal is someone that's living among us that's 250 years of age and older, that is aware of, has knowledge of that life is a choice, and death is not a predetermined event. They can live as long as they so choose. So to him, he simply doesn't focus on death. He focuses on living each day to its fullest, and to him, life is as long as he so chooses to live. So that's why I say there's about at least 1 and possibly 25 immortals living among us today.
But should we bump into one of them at the fish market and we saw them, they would look elderly, right? They wouldn't look
right. Exactly. They all look like a very good-looking, I should say, senior citizens. This gentleman kind of reminds me a little bit of Mark Victor Hansen. I'm not sure if you know him or not. He's one of the co-authors of Chicken Soup of the Soul. He's got that kind of energy, that kind of a look, and they blend in with society, and you could bump into one and not really know it. It could be somebody that looks like a little old grandmother or a little grandfather, but yet they could be hundreds of years of age, and they choose to live like that. They don't want to stand out in the crowd as you would think. I haven't many that looks like any of the fictional immortals, but they definitely have the ability, it seems to me, to control their appearance a little bit, at least enough so they can remarry again in their life.
Wow. You talked earlier about fear, and I certainly agree with that. As a whole, I think society is really is afraid of not only death but lots of other things. In our world, certainly we have our preconceived ideas of what immortal is. You see movies all the time, different ideas and different variations of people who are immortal, but from what it sounds like, from what you said, these folks choose to keep on living. It's not like they're just waiting around to die. It's almost as if they will choose when they pass on.
Well, if you think about it, that's exactly it. We, as a society, have taught each other to focus on death, to plan for death, to bet on death. I mean, that's basically what life insurance is betting on you're going to die at a certain age. And these people totally focus on living each day. They don't focus on the dying. They don't focus on the death. They, to them, their friends and relatives haven't died. They've just gone somewhere else on the planet somewhere. And if you keep focusing on life, you'll realize that there are ways that we can use that and empower us to extend our own lives. If I can give you a real quick example, there was a famous musician not too long ago called John Denver. I'm not sure if you're familiar with John Denver or not. But the story is that he used to tell his family and friends, I'm going to die in my plane, I'm going to die in my plane, I'm going to die in my plane. Well, one day his plane crashed off the California coast, and sure enough, he died in his plane. So if he can predict, or at least let's just say a command that his life be extinguished dying in a plane crash, what about changing or commanding our lives to live to be hundreds of years of age, thousands of years of age, or even be immortal? And so that's why, as I was starting to interview this gentleman, I started to realize we just, even with our simple language patterns, we can, and our focus in life, we can change how long we want to live. And in my research, I believe I've extended my own life many years just by doing the simple techniques that I learned from this gentleman.
Well, we really want to get into to learning those specific techniques. I want you to tell us how convey as much as you can to us on how we ourselves might be able to impact our own longevity. But really, we got to cover some of the bases on these people that you ran into. I mean, how can you prove that they're really that old? I mean, if I told you I was 400 years old, I mean, how could you prove me wrong?
Well, that's, as a scientist, that's the most difficult part of this, and that's one of the reasons why I was going to keep this a personal task list, because in reality, Julius Caesar, King David, they never did issue any chariot driver's licenses, and so we don't have any of that kind of documentation to look at and look it up. There's very limited amount of documentation, and as my occupation is a financial security consultant, I can see people that are really good hackers and fraudsters take about 2 hours, and they can recreate anybody's identity, and it look very, very, very professional. So if I produced for you documents or pictures, they could be just as easily frauded as it could be the actual thing. So to me, it would be improbable with documentation to actually prove somebody's of age. So what do we have to work with? Well, as I started working with this gentleman, I finally decided, after many discussions with many people, I started to lay out his story and put it into a book format so that I could, at least in a logical manner, present people at least his information, and they could take it any way they want. And as I started to do so, I realized there's a lot of circumstantial evidence surrounding this gentleman, stuff that if I could put it all together for you and lay it out in a nice logical sense, you could see it after a time. It's almost impossible for him not to be that way. Now, to be totally honest, unless we performed a live dissection of the man in front of 1,000 prominent scientists, we won't absolutely positively know for sure his exact age. I'm going to make every effort to get a DNA sample from him, but even then, that could be questionable, because we don't know what a DNA sample of somebody over 120 years really looks like. As a scientist, you got to have something to compare it to, other than, or at least something reasonable to compare it to. So I'm going to get the DNA sample when the opportunity presents itself, just for my scientific curiosity, and I'll present the evidence, what I find. But that, to me, alone will not prove or disprove his age. But the circumstantial evidence around it, yes, there's quite a bit. And I think if I get a chance and the opportunity presents itself to lay this all out, again, it's something we can't do over a phone call, but lay it all out kind of in a logical manner, it's pretty overwhelming. And, we do convict some people by circumstantial evidence, particularly when we don't have a smoking gun. So that's kind of where I started going with it. In my own research, I was able to find some data. Some of it I can share with you, but a lot of it I can't, that actually positively proved it to myself that this man really is nearly 2,800 years of age. So again, I'm going to do my best to present the information, but my goal right now is just to present his stories and present to people the possibility that these people do exist, and this is the information that I gather from them. So if you're looking for absolute positive evidence, it's not going to happen tonight, that's for sure.
You kind of brought us to a good point. If I was a dude that was 2,800 years old, I wouldn't want people to know who I was for that main fact. I wouldn't want a bunch of governments or scientists coming and poking me and sticking me with stuff. And, I mean, that's kind of why I would think he would not really want to present himself or any of these other folks. Is that pretty much the case? Are they kind of afraid that people are going to go overboard with this and start dissecting them and stuff like that?
Well, exactly. And if you understand history, even before then, if people were unusual or lived a little too long, they were treated as heretics or witches, burned at the stake, executed, all kinds of stuff. And, we've all sorts of persecution, whether it be religious beliefs or something else in time. And now, in recent times, we have what's called the paparazzi, and these celebrities, they just get literally hounded to death by the paparazzi. And, of course, if he really did present himself to the world, what would stop a government agency to lock him up and just turn him into a lab rat hidden from science? We don't know. They probably have such people today, as far as we know. But this gentleman definitely wants his privacy, and that was part of my earning his respect and earning his trust was to respect his privacy. So that's why there's some things about him that I can't reveal. Part of it at his request, and part of it because basically to protect his privacy. As I go along, and I notice other people are very in similar situations, but I'm hoping that someday, as part of my work, that we can eventually present him to society. Maybe if I can find a way to shelter him and do so. But right now, I'm just presenting his stories and his information, which I think is totally valuable for the world to hear and understand.
And honestly, Ben, if this gentleman were standing before me, I don't think I'd want to do that to him anyway. I don't think it's worth it. I don't think it'd be worth it for me to prove that he exists absolutely by doing those types of things, because in the end, I don't think it's worth it. As you said earlier, people are going to believe or they're not going to believe. And let's be honest, you can give absolute proof about something to people, and they still don't believe it. So in the end, I kind of respect that to a point, and I don't think I'd want to be responsible for maybe putting somebody into harm's way because of something that's odd compared to our standards of normal.
Oh, exactly. I don't know if you remember this, but not too long ago, actually a few months ago, one of the most observed, one of the most documented events in my lifetime, the landing on the moon took place. There was an anniversary, of the landing on the moon, and yet there's people out there today that are actually convinced that this didn't happen, it was all faked, and so there's still a controversy. There's still a controversy in one of the most witnessed, observed events, because there's something in there that just doesn't quite jive for them. Something they didn't, no matter all the pictures, all the witnesses and whatever. And so if I can't prove this or disprove that the man landed on the moon, how can I prove something or disprove something that's 2,800 years it took place 2,800 years ago? And so that's why the evidence piece is going to come out as a circumstantial, but proving it absolutes, I just don't see that in society today. And you're right. We just got to. If you knew who this gentleman really was, you would respect him too, and I'm sure. And that's why we're just going to discuss his stories, discuss his incredible information, and you'll find that is just a tremendous value to society and for all of us to learn from.
Yeah, before the show, you sent us a letter saying that you couldn't talk about certain things, what the guy's name was, where exactly he lived, and we understand all that. There's also reasons we understand why you can't really talk about certain spiritual events that he's witnessed firsthand, like the miracles of Jesus Christ or anything else that happened a long time ago that we have a record for that people tend to get into controversy about. So
I can talk about a few things.
Okay, what can you tell us? Everything that you can talk about, please.
Well, there's a few things about Jesus Christ we want to talk about, and that is we have at least one living eyewitness today that actually met the man and had a discussion with him. I can tell you that much. He had a 6-year friendship with this gentleman. The good news is that he did witness a few of the miracles that are in the gospel, and from his best of his knowledge, events in the gospel seem to be accurate. What some people might consider the bad news, I consider the great news, is this gentleman has had eyewitness accounts of Jesus Christ that are not in the Bible, which to me are more phenomenal and more incredible than even what you've been reading in the Bible. And those are the events I'm not able to talk to in detail, but I will tell you this, that there really was a Jesus Christ, and he did live in the Mediterranean, the Israel area, 2,000 years ago. And one of the ironic things this gentleman told me is he's never revealed his identity to anyone, but the last person to figure it out on his own was Jesus Christ. He came to this gentleman's door, this 2,000-year-old Immortal's door, and knocked on there and said, "I know who you are, and let's talk." And that's how their friendship began 2,000 years ago. So it's quite a bit of a story. That's the part of the story I can't go into too much detail because we all want to know, all the different controversies about Jesus Christ. But that's I'm making. I'll tell you what, my life's mission to get that story out. So I'm going to keep bugging this guy to get permission to tell that story. Let me go back up a little bit. When I was interviewing with him, it was right when the Passion of the Christ had come out, and I think the Da Vinci Code had just come out. And I don't know if you know about the Passion of the Christ, but people in Europe loved the Passion. The people in the Middle East didn't. And then when the Da Vinci Code came out, it was the other way around. And so he just kind of said, I don't know if the world is ready for what I know about, the real Christ, the historical Jesus Christ. So that's why he kind of said, please don't go too much on that. And so I've kind of held off on that part of the story. But to me, it's so phenomenal, it's got to be told. So I'm going to make it a life's mission to get his permission to do so.
Just to kind of finish up on what you said, I mean, kind of tell us your thought process. You're sitting in front of this guy, and he's talking about one of probably the biggest figure in all the world to most people. I mean, this got to be like mind-blowing. It's got to be like, whoa, type of thing, I mean, it was something that kind of just like takes your breath away, or when you hear this, or I mean, what's going through your mind as he's relating these stories to you?
Well, at their second or third interview, I basically acquired a permanent set of goosebumps. And if I could tell you that the whole story, right here, you'd have that permanent set of goosebumps too. So, yeah. And I said that the stuff I can't tell you tonight, I hate to be a teaser here, but the stuff I can't tell you tonight is more incredible about this man than what I can tell you. I went looking for the oldest man alive to discover the secret to extending my life, and what I found was a whole lot more, especially his accounts of history, things of unwritten history, and then to find out he was living in Jerusalem 2,000 years ago and knew pretty much the whole story of this guy. Wow, it was just phenomenal. He had a few run-ins as well with several of the old prophets during his life. There's a couple that he had run in that I can't discuss either, but you'll be amazed when you hear the whole story. I'll tell you that much.
Well, society is moving along at a fairly rapid pace. We were discussing the Highlander movies in the chat room earlier, and we believe, a lot of us believe, that we're in some kind of quickening, where everything is speeded up in some way. So maybe, just maybe, society will get to a point where these immortals think that we can handle what they have to tell us, and hopefully there will be a second book to come out that will include all the stuff that you're not at liberty to discuss right now.
Well, I definitely feel like I'm being pushed spiritually to bring this information out. So begrudgingly, I don't consider myself a writer. I do a lot of writing for business and technical journals, and so when I kind of got pushed to write this book, and now I see it's going to be a lot more than just one book, it's being pushed. But it looks like we have to tell this. It'd be a crime against humanity not to spill the beans on this one. So tonight we're going to talk about as much as I can on his history and what I learned of how to extend our lives, and then hopefully another interview someday I can tell you about his New Testament experiences and his Old Testament experiences, both of them. There's quite a bit to tell on both parts.
So here's a guy that's been alive forever. You know, to me, 2,800 years seems like forever. You know, I'm only 34. So, you know, 2,800 seems like a long time to me. And so kind of tell me, I mean, if you can, talk about this guy's personality. Here's a guy that hung out with JC, and, you know, yesterday he watched a movie. You know what I mean? I mean, it's got to be.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you know, I mean, to me, it's just absolutely mind-blowing to go from one extreme like that to the other and just kind of silently sit back and watch all this stuff happen. I mean, is this, can you walk us through maybe his personality, what kind of guy he is, what kind of person he is, and all that?
Yeah, he started off, again, 2,800 years ago. Let's see, I keep forgetting this date, but it's roughly during the reign of King of Joash, the king of Israel, is when he was born. And Joash, according to scholars, was about between 805 BC and 796 BC. So that's kind of how I was able to determine approximately what his age is. You know, back then their calendars were quite a bit different. Anyway, he grew up basically as a sheep herder, goat herder near the Jordan-Israel border. Borders are today in that approximate area, and eventually he became a merchant, one of the many merchants around the Mediterranean Sea. And as a merchant, that once they became a very good and well-established merchants, they often had contact with many of the ruling elite at the time, whether it be emperors, empresses, kings, queens, rich people, and he met several of the name droppers of history that we've talked about in our history books. Lots to do with, again, the kings and queens of Israel, Jordan, Egypt. One name dropper, he did see Cleopatra, could describe her in detail. He never personally met her, but he did a lot of business with some of her associates. He got a chance to meet Julius Caesar, had a chance to talk with him. But again, they did a lot. They would, like in Julius Caesar's case, they would greet these merchants, and then they would sit in the back of the room and let their associates do all the bartering and negotiations, and then they would say goodbye, and then they would But he had a chance to actually meet the man, shake his hand, have the typical greeting of a ruler. Peter the Great's another name dropper that came out in some of our discussions, some of the early popes, again, several of the emperors. One of the fascinating stories that I thought was when he went on a Phoenician merchant ship, let's see, around 200-300 BC. I don't have the date in front of me, where he actually went to ancient China and met the first emperor of China, Emperor Qin, who is where the name China comes from today, and was able to obtain gunpowder. Now, one of the things that historians debate about exactly when China had gunpowder. Well, on his trip, they had gunpowder there. They didn't use it for armaments. They used it mostly for entertainment purposes, but he brought some of it back with him when he traveled back to the Middle East and the Mediterranean area. He did spend a short time with the Greek army, and he became basically a sheriff watching a town north of Rome as part of the member of the Greek army. He did so for several reasons. It was a good job, and it also gave him the opportunity to do some of his, scouting out for merchants. At the time, the Greeks pretty much ruled the Mediterranean, so instead of fighting with the Greeks, he became part of their merchant marine, you could say. Later on in life, he had an opportunity. There was a problem in the Dark Ages with plagues, and he heard of a woman living up in Mongolia that had basically a cure for some of these plagues. And it's a long story as to how this affected or how it was able to solve some of the problems with the plagues. But he went up there to visit her, and as part of his journey, he got to meet the emperor at the time, which was Genghis Khan. So he had a chance to sit down and have dinner with Genghis Khan as part of his journeys. Again, he was a merchant traveling to obtain some merchandise from a woman who had a very important technique for solving the problems with the plagues during the Dark Ages. And the list goes on and on. There are several other interesting people we can talk about here and there if you're interested as well tonight.
the thing that I'm thinking about, you know, I can't get off the. I'm interested in his history and what he has seen. There's just so many things that he could bring to society if he came out and disclosed what he knows. Like some of the dead languages that I'm sure he's encountered through the years that we don't even know how they were correctly pronounced. You know, he's heard those tongues spoken. And,
his first language is like a ancient form of Aramaic, and quite frankly, I don't understand it. I'm making recordings of it, or trying to, and give it to some of these historians, but this time I don't have permission to do so because it might reveal his identity. But I do intend to verify some of his Aramaic. I know a few words, and I could recognize that it sounds like Aramaic to me, but I don't recognize the language because I just don't speak it. But he basically knows all of the languages around the Mediterranean Sea, and even the ancient form of the Greek language, and Latin and French and Spanish and Italian and Hebrew and a few other languages. So he does know English. It's broken, but he does know English, and we were able to communicate with that as well.
So we talked a lot about way deep in history, back to where a lot of it to some people are just stories. Did he give you any kind of opinion or insight as to history that's a little more recent, like maybe like World War II or anything like that? Did he ever talk about any stuff like that?
Yeah, I asked him again where he was in the World Wars and how did he survive them. In particular, World War II, if you remember right, basically the war, a lot of it took place in the Mediterranean Sea, and I'm going, well, if you spent most of your life here, how did you survive World War II? It turned out that he, some circumstance, again, I don't have the details in front of me, ended up in Scotland during the time of World War II. So if northern Scotland, if you think about it, that was actually kind of one of the safest places to be in Europe and Africa during World War II. There was some action, obviously, in London and South England, but Scotland was pretty much spared for the most part during the World War. So he kind of evaded most of the problems that they had in the Mediterranean area. And of course, it was very difficult to travel once he got to Scotland before the war broke out to get back to the Mediterranean afterwards. I believe World War I, he was in the Mediterranean near Lebanon area. That's where he spent most of that area.
So one thing that I'm interesting to hear, if perhaps you spoke about it, or if it came up, was how does a person like this, after seeing so much history, how does a person like this feel about kind of where we're at today? Did he have much of an opinion on how we've evolved as a society or as a world or anything like that?
Oh, I asked him a lot of questions about that. There's actually good and bad. Let me tell you, the good part, obviously, the technology has grown better. We're actually a lot more wealthy as a society. We do a lot. We have a lot more people. He's totally fascinated with the train systems around the Mediterranean Sea, the subways, the trains, how they're on time. He can just about go anywhere he wants to go now by train. Obviously, he has cabs. He can travel much faster and travel much farther. And he's actually been on a plane a few times as well. So the technology has grown very well. And also we have less diseases. We have better hygiene, and we have access to more, let's say entertainment. The bad news, I guess, is that people seem to have gotten a little bit meaner, more disrespectful. There were rulers at that time that could basically rule a certain area in a particular country, but they didn't rule the planet. Where now we've got rulers that can actually large parts of the planet. So there's different good and bad in there. One of the things I did have to ask him, and you'd probably be interested in this, is about global warming. I said, well, was it colder years ago, warmer back to, what was it like then compared to now? And he said it's actually gotten cooler than it was and drier. He said it used to be so hot in the Middle East, many people would move up to England to get away from the heat. And he also mentioned that they had a lot of lush gardens in the Middle East, in particular like in Jordan and Israel, and they rarely, extremely rarely, had any snowfalls. But recently we've had snowfalls in the Israel-Jordan area. So to him, things have gotten colder and drier as far as he's concerned in the last 2,800 years. So that was his take on that piece of history.
So are you saying that he doesn't believe in global warming? He doesn't, as far as, you know, his perspective, he doesn't agree that the planet's heating up?
No, he thinks just the opposite. It's global cooling. So there's a lot of scientists that also believe in the global cooling theory. I believe it's the cycles, but I won't go into details on that right now.
Right.
We could probably bat that around for the next 10 hours or so.
Yeah. But I was curious to find out his opinion of everything, and to him, things have gotten colder and drier, which I found very amazing.
One question that I've had, you know, and maybe you can answer it, maybe you can't. Does this man, does he prescribe to any of the major mainstream religions? What is his views on God and the afterlife and all the big questions, you know?
Well, that's a great question, and that's kind of one of the bonus ones that I can talk a little bit about. Obviously, he saw the birth of our modern-day religions, at least the Western culture sides. He was born and raised in a Jewish household, so obviously he has a background in the Jewish religions. To him, the Creator is an invisible friend that sits next beside him and is in constant contact with him all the time. So he has evolved spiritually beyond what we would consider a religion. So he's evolved beyond religion, if I can use that term, to the point where, you know, religion to him is just basically a community organization or a group that he goes to for community functions. So he's attended Christian churches, Catholic churches, Muslim churches, and Jewish synagogues, all as part of his identity at that time, or the family he was with at that time. But to him, he's evolved past that. So I asked him if he ever did go into Bible reading. He says, I hear it when I go to these churches, but I don't, or synagogues, or whatever. But I don't read it. He doesn't read it personally, and quite frankly, he doesn't really have to. He's lived it, you know, for all practical purposes.
Right. I know it seems like I'm making shallow of it, but you know, I really do understand the concept of being beyond it. Even though technically it's impossible, because I'm only 30 years old, you know.
Well, you're like a baby to this guy. In fact, we all are like a baby to this guy.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So we're going to break, and we're going to come back in 3 minutes. Mr. Abba, I would like for you to stay along, and if you would, we're really interested in what these men have done to prolong their life. Some of the techniques, you know, whether it be food or some kind of mineral or vitamin that they particularly, you know, is it garlic? We don't know, but we want to find out. So let's go to break, and in 3 minutes, if you could stay with us, we'll ask you about those kinds of things.
Certainly will.
And we are back. We are talking with Ben Abba. He is the author of Secrets of an Immortal. Yeah, you were discussing some questions that were being asked in the chat room while we were on break. You're free to finish those up on the air, however you see fit, or you can just go right on into giving us longevity tips that you've learned from these immortals.
Well, I try to really answer what questions I could see, but I can only go back so far on my chat room. So I'm just going to go ahead and talk about some more of the tips on what this gentleman taught me and how to extending our lives. And to start off with, as Americans, we like the 5-second answer. And even though that the 5-second answer doesn't do true justice for answering the question, I'll give you to it anyway, and that is programming. I truly believe it's our programming that's caused us to die at an earlier age than we should be, and that's with our programming we can extend our lives. And from what I've learned from this gentleman, that's exactly what's happened in his life. There's nothing in the bottom of our feet or on our little bottoms that has an expiration date. We can live as long as we so choose in our bodies. Our body's designed to extend ourselves as long as we want to, and that's one of the lessons, the most difficult lessons I learned from this gentleman. So to start off with, part of what comes of programming is our belief system. What we believe, if we believe in that we have to live as long as our parents and die like they do, or that we have to die as a younger age, or if we have to die a certain way, we're going to be probably granted that wish. But if we choose to believe that we can live as long as we want, that we can become an immortal, we'll be granted that wish as well. And that's part of what I've noticed as I started incorporating what he put into my life is I changed my belief systems to match that of living, focusing on life and not on death. Mm-hmm. And I noticed subtle changes in my my language patterns. I've noticed subtle changes in what I eat. I've noticed subtle changes in how I treat other people. I've noticed subtle changes in my lifestyle in general. So that's part of what I learned from this gentleman is focusing on life and basically changing your life to live and not changing your life to die at an early age. I also noticed that this gentleman, diet is a very important part of our lifestyle, and there was a special not too long ago by Barbara Walters called How to Live to 150, mm-hmm. and in that special there's a couple things that this gentleman did as well. And one of the things they talked about in that show is how as an ingredient in red wine, I think it's called resveratrol, that seems to extend our lives. Well, this 2,800-year-old gentleman does take a glass of red wine every day.
One glass, right?
One glass.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's probably once in an occasion he may have 2 glasses or a few more, but for the most part he has 1 glass of wine a day. And he's had wine all his life, so obviously that didn't, as long as he kept it in moderation, it seemed to extend his life. To my shock and amazement, none of these immortals were pure vegetarians. They all had about 10 to 20% of their diet had protein. This particular gentleman eats basically fish, lamb, or pheasant. That's pretty much the main sources of meat for him. None of these immortals that I'm aware of had beef, pork, or chicken. So I noticed that was kind of a subtle difference in what we're used to having. Mm-hmm. But also I noticed, like this special How to Live to 150 Years of Age, they mentioned on there a group of people called CRDs, the Calorie Restricted Diet people. And that is they believe that they can extend their lives by eating reduced or almost no calories, just the bare minimum. Well, a lot of these immortals that I've researched and come in contact with, in particular the 2,800-year-old gentleman, they would eat in their 3 meals a day what I would eat in one snack. It was very limited amount of food. He would basically have a fish, and he would probably prepare a lunch and a dinner from that fish, and then turn it into a soup overnight, and that might be his breakfast or his lunch the next day. So he'd basically get 3, possibly 5 meals out of one fish.
And
had go ahead.
Been maintaining that lifestyle their whole life? Because I have noticed that me, a 32-year-old man, I eat a whole lot more than a 70-year-old woman would. My caloric intake is higher because my energy expenditures are higher. Have they been doing that their whole life, or is this something that they've kind of settled into as a routine because of their age?
Well, again, I haven't been around his whole life, so
I know,
I can't answer that question.
Did they say, did they say anything? Did they tell you, when I was younger I eat more or anything like that?
It seemed to me this was like a natural for him.
Mm-hmm.
So it seemed to be a major part of his life. And again, thinking about what life was like maybe 500 years ago, 1,000 years ago, food probably was in short supply. So they probably had, many times, they wouldn't have a meal. They simply didn't have the food available to them. Mm-hmm. And so probably having a little amount of food and, stretching what they had out for a long time, it became part of his lifestyle. And probably embraced it. And also I believe, and I fully believe this, that he's got to the point where his body is so efficient digesting the food, he probably gets more nutrients out of his food than we do. Mm-hmm. So it's possible he really doesn't need to do that. And this gentleman wasn't a very big guy, and he's not very tall. He's not definitely not overweight. He's a very, healthy-looking gentleman for his age, very healthy for his age. But again, it's like he's adjusted to a lifestyle, and it seems to be very customary to him. I noticed he did mention he goes to celebrations once in a while. We'll have a little cake and ice cream, if he gets invited to a wedding, whatever. But at this point, it's not part of his diet. There was some raw fruits and vegetables and some grains in there, but for the most part, it was centered around a little bit of meat and a little bit of bread that he had every day.
Mm-hmm. I just wanted to point out that the notion that death is or aging is a disease is not a new one. Guys like Deepak Chopra firmly believe that aging, and he's not the only one, but that they firmly believe that aging is a disease, and it's a disease that can be cured. A lot of these people are working really hard every day trying to prove that and trying to cure that, so to speak. So it's not entirely impossible or far out there notion, because a lot of people are starting to lean that way. But speaking of doctors, does he regularly get seen by a doctor? Does he go, does he have those kinds of issues where he has to go and, for a physical or anything like that?
We brought up a couple of really good questions I'd like to explore. I'll do the first one you mentioned is about, aging as a disease. One of the things I'm doing on my blog is putting a lot of collaborating evidence that goes along with what this gentleman is telling me. And there is a lot of evidence that people are not aging, or they're actually anti-aging. And one in particular I wanted to bring up about that is the story which recently was on the Learning Channel about a young girl named Brooke Green. I don't know if you're familiar with her or not, but she's basically a 16-year-old girl that's only aged 1 month per year. So she looks like a 16-month toddler, but she actually is 16 years of age. And scientists are baffled as to how this young girl isn't able to age more than 1 month physically and mentally per year. Now, there's speculation that, different reasons why it could be, but what she is a living example of how, and in fact, they call her the child frozen in time, a person who is able to control her age, obviously not voluntarily and not to her advantage, but she's able to control her physical age. And there's a scientific belief that we could figure out how is it that she's able to control that. We could also cure anti-aging as well. That's just one example of many examples of people that have either stopped aging or have found a way to anti-age in their life. And there's many other scientific and similar stories out there of that. The second question you were mentioning is, you can repeat it for me real second.
Sure. I was just curious. A lot of healthy people see doctors, for physicals or something like that. Does he do anything like that?
If you can think about it, for the most part, all his life he was his own doctor. So for the most part, he has been his own doctor. He mentioned not too long ago he was fishing along the shore and cut his foot on a glass and had to get stitches. But for the most part, that's the only time he's ever seen a doctor. And I think for the most part, he also avoids seeing doctors because they might start figuring things out that he's not who he appears to be.
Well, him and I have something in common, is that we don't like to see doctors. His reasons are a lot different than mine, but...
Well, obviously for broken legs and getting stitches, they're probably you have to go see them, and they're the best to take care of that. But when it comes to for diseases or anything, no, he doesn't go see any doctors for that.
Well, I was going to ask him a few more. I am particularly interested in garlic. I have been for years. I think it's there's a nice big smart sounding word that I can't recall right now that means cure-all. How does he feel specifically about garlic or onions, anything in that family?
Well, he eats very much a Mediterranean diet, and of course the Mediterranean diet is full of garlic and oregano.
Okay.
And one of the questions I did ask him is, for the most part, toothbrushes and toothpastes haven't been around much more than 100 years. So what did he do to preserve his teeth? Still has his original teeth. In fact, if he ever does smile and open it and gives you a full set of his teeth, that kind of gives away his age. His teeth look really, really bad. I mean, they're his original teeth, but they look like 3,000 or 2,800-year-old teeth. They're pretty black and they're dark looking. And the reason for this is what he used all his life, or most of his life, to preserve his teeth was oregano. He made a gargle out of oregano, and it did a great job helping him preserve his teeth. The bad news is the oregano causes teeth to go pretty blackened, and they're pretty ugly. So that's one of the things that's maybe someday he'll get a nice dentist to clean up his teeth a little bit, but if the dentist doesn't freak out when he opens his mouth. But for the most part, yes, oregano and garlic are two very powerful antibiotics and herbs that he uses in his diet. And I don't know if you're aware of this or not, but many of our spices do come from the Mediterranean area, and there is a belief, and I'm one of those people, the believers, that we can just about cure every disease on the planet with our spice rack. And there's a lot of different spices that take care of a lot of different things, and garlic and oregano are two of them that help ward away a lot of diseases and particular infections.
I guess he doesn't have any kind of problems with sunspots or any kind of cancer.
No. He doesn't have
good for that kind of stuff, because I've heard parsley is actually good for that, and I don't know how, but that's what I heard. No comment on cancer.
Well, he doesn't. To me, he doesn't have any cancer. Again, I'm not a medical doctor, MD, but again, when you're living life and you're living life to its fullest, again, if you focus on cancer, you're focusing on death. If you focus on living, cancer, your body takes care of the cancer. It's just a non-issue, just like the flu bug is.
It's all about the programming, right?
It's all about the programming. You got it.
Okay.
I'm just looking through, Ben. I'm just looking through some of the highlights that you had sent us, kind of keep us, on track about this guy. And God, there's just so many things I want to ask you, but for the sake of not losing myself in the conversation, there was something that I found interesting, and I don't think that you touched on it when we were talking about some of the history. Was there anything that you could tell us about something that he witnessed or something that he was involved in that's not written in history?
Oh, yes. I have a really good story to talk about. Well, a couple of those. Let me tell you about one that kind of relates to something I did tell you about. Because of his work finding a way to reduce the plagues in Europe, he caught the attention of a group around the 1300s called the Knights Templar. I believe you guys have heard of the Knights Templar by now.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
They're quite busy and quite involved with a lot of the things that were going around the Mediterranean Sea. And he got assigned to a garrison near Toledo, Spain, and he was primarily a banker with them, but he also did some deputy sheriff duties as well. And when I first heard about this, being a Knights Templar, a member of the Knights Templar, of course, I got to ask him the big question: did you guys find the Holy Grail? And he said he didn't hear if they found the Holy Grail or not, but to him they found an artifact which was to him as important and as powerful as the Holy Grail and the Ark of the Covenant, and that artifact was called the Staff of King David. Now, it makes sense that a King David would have a scepter or staff. It was kind of a typical attribute that a lot of these rulers had, but I'd never heard of that being an artifact of great power. And he could explain to me in detail what this artifact was and its powers and such, which is not I could find no research on whatsoever. However, I did do a little digging around on the internet, and there was one blog on one site that talked about the Staff of King David, and that's a blog about Oak Island. Are you guys familiar with Oak Island at all?
No.
Are you talking about the staff that budded? Had been cut down for a long time, and it budded a new branch. There's
no.
in the Bible about a staff like that.
The Oak Island is an island off of Nova Scotia.
Okay, go ahead.
And it's the home of a place known as the Money Pit. I don't know if you've heard of the term the Money Pit at all.
No.
Okay, well, in this little island off of Nova Scotia, not quite 100 years ago, many people found this treasure trove buried in this middle of this island with many booby traps in it, and they've been searching and trying to dig it up and trying to find out what's in this money pit. Well, according to this blog, there's evidence that this money pit was created by the Knights Templar. And one of the artifacts that they believed that was in this money pit was the staff of King David. Well, this gentleman is not internet savvy at all, and here he is telling me the Knights Templar finding an artifact which has very little information about whatsoever that was associated with the Knights Templar. And here I found a blog totally, separate from this gentleman that had this information that, again, it's not proven that that artifact was there or the Knights Templar had it, but he definitely knew that they did find it, and they talked about what they did with it, and all the stories with the Knights Templar. So that was an incredible story. There's going to be a chapter in this new book about the Knights Templar, but it's just fascinating, some of the things he saw that are not written about the Knights Templar that he was obviously a part of unwritten history.
Mm-hmm.
Would you like to hear some more of those examples?
Yes, we would.
Absolutely.
Okay, another one which I have a chapter done on is in fact, if you want pick somebody in your audience and give me their email, I'll send them a copy of this sample chapter. It's chapter 10 about his going to Rome and building a clock tower, a wind-powered clock tower. Now, if you think about it, this is towards the 1500s, kind of 1500s time range. They had various clocks were just starting to become popular back then, and it makes sense they had windmills to power some of these clocks. And so in order to build this clock tower, he went looking around for a good, reputable, or at least somebody interested to help him engineer the project. And lo and behold, he found a recommended young engineer who had just finished his apprenticeship by the name of Leonardo da Vinci. Now, at the time, Leonardo wasn't very, very famous. He hadn't done many of his paintings back then. But this gentleman and Leonardo basically had a 3-year business relationship building this clock tower, wind-powered clock tower. Now, the story is going to kind of, again, we have a lot of preconceived notions of Leonardo da Vinci, and this gentleman only knew him when he was a young man, basically in his late 20s, early 30s. But he had some really interesting insights on Leonardo da Vinci and his incredible drawing ability. One of the interesting pieces of this story is that this clock tower, as he started to describe it for me, it sounded more like he wasn't necessarily trying to tell time, but he was trying to change time. And it turns out this was their attempt at an experiment to change time, to perform time travel. Mm-hmm. So this gentleman and Leonardo da Vinci built a clock tower to change time. It was their belief back then that time was a river, and if they had the right kind of ship, they could change it, or at least navigate it, and that's what their attempt was. So the sample chapter, which if you pick out somebody, I'll send them a copy of, talks about, goes over some of his experiences with Leonardo da Vinci and building this clock tower and performing the experiment of how they change time.
We have someone in the chat room.
All right, I got it here. I think I can save it here.
That same person that had just PM'd you, her name is Sitane Wacko. She is also live and on the air. She probably has a question or comment for you.
Okay, go ahead.
Hey, how are you guys?
Hello there.
Great.
You almost did answer my question. However, I can see how this question can still be pertinent. In the book Physics of Time by Fred Alan Wolf, there is a story that speaks of an individual who can move throughout the entire world from the comfort of his home. Is it possible that the individual you've been talking with has simply transcended time and can travel across the world from this day and age? But because he has traveled history of 2008 years, he considers himself to be this old.
No, this is not that particular gentleman. I think there may be such a gentleman does exist, but this is definitely not him. Once I explain to you his full history, you'll understand this is a totally different person if such a person does exist. So he's actually lived every day like we have for 2,800 years, doing different tasks around the Mediterranean Sea, and it's quite an incredible life he's lived.
That's pretty cool. I've been in here chatting with everybody, and it just kind of came up because if you can travel throughout time, it doesn't necessarily mean that you can't bring yourself to a corporeal state. So that's why I had the question.
Yeah, and that's part of the way I was with the investigation was to find out, again, if this gentleman was even human and all that kind of stuff. And everything that I have in my research is this is a human being that lived just like us, that lived this many years. His one of his big things is he's got the belief system that he doesn't have to die, and he's got a very strong spiritual belief in a creator, and he's had an excellent lifestyle. And the combination has kept him alive this many years. And that's one of the things that I thought was pretty incredible to share with everybody is we all have this if we so choose it, and we can have this lifestyle if we want to live that, just like his.
Now, I had one more question. I know you answered it in the chat room, but I know a lot of listeners out there aren't in the chat room either. You said that you were going to be releasing an internet book soon?
Yeah, I'm going to try to get the e-book out by Christmas. That's the Secrets of an Immortal book, and then I'll get it to the publisher. I've got some pre-orders. I'm still taking pre-orders right now, and people pre-order the book. I give them a free copy of the Wake Up Moments of Inspiration book. And what I was going to do is get the e-book out right away, get it to everybody that's pre-ordered the book, and then get it to the publishers and let them. Sometimes they take 30 days to publish it. Sometimes they take longer. I don't have a formal publisher right now, so I'm going to probably have to do a self-publishing it once I get. But the goal is to get the e-book out by Christmas so everybody can get a copy and start reading that first, if they so choose, and then get the hard copy, whatever it takes to get it to the printer and shipped out.
And how much would that e-book be?
I'm just charging one price, which includes the hard copy of the e-book and Wake Up Moments of Inspiration right now. So it's standard price is going to be $27.95. I guess going to do that, and that's going to include the e-book, the hardcover, and the Wake Up Moments of Inspiration, which is kind of a soft covered book. It's almost a paperback, but not quite.
All right, awesome. Thank you for answering my questions. Have a good day, and I'm going to be listening to the next half hour.
Okay, thank you for listening, and blessings. Well, my main blog is benabba.com. That's BENABBA.com or BEN-ABBA.com. I have both domains in case one goes down. And that's Grand Central Station for most of my research. The main website for the books is secretsofanimmortal.com. It's just the words put together or with dashes. Secrets of N-A-N Immortal.com. And again, if I'm taking pre-orders for the book, and if you buy the book before it's released, I'll throw in some free gifts, which includes Wake Up Moments of Inspiration as well.
Okay, we have someone else calling in. Question for Ben Abba here at Nights of Awakening. Caller, you are live and on the air. Can we get your first name only, please?
Liera.
Liera, hello there.
Hi, Liera.
Hi there, Ben. How are you?
Great. How you doing?
I'm good, thanks. I came into the show after it started, but I've been listening with much interest, and I have a question for you.
Please go ahead.
It concerns the subject of time and time travel, which has been recently discussed. And I wanted to ask you if you were familiar with the stories about Henry Deacon and Andrew Basiago and their experiences related to time travel and teleportation.
I have heard of them. I have their books sitting in a pile of books to read when I ever get a chance, and that's about as far as I got. So I've heard a little bit of their stories. I think I got a book about them sitting here that just hasn't been read. So that's about the best I can answer on that question for you.
Well, I guess one other question I have for you concerning this person you've been talking about. Has he said anything about non-terrestrial entities or non-humans and interactions with them?
Well, that's an excellent question. What I'm not going to include the book is a story he told me, and that is 2,000 years ago, there was more things flying around than there are today. He claims that he saw we call objects in the sky quite frequently, and they would just refer to them as the chariots of the gods. He never saw one up close. He didn't know who was actually in them. He said he saw one at a distance at land one day, but he didn't know who was in it or what was in it. but they were quite frequently all over the place 2,000 years ago. And around the campfire, they had many stories about different beings and different things, but he never saw one, never heard of, actually heard of an interaction with one. So he's kind of open to the idea that there may be out there, but he definitely saw things flying around 2,000 years ago.
Thank you very much for those answers. I look forward to hearing the rest of the program.
Thank you for listening. Blessings.
Blessings to you.
Thanks for asking those questions. Answering those questions for us as best you can, Mr. Abba. A lot of people are curious about the big claims that you make, and I was actually kind of skeptical before the show myself. I'm rather glad that you've approached it in a down-to-earth sense, like you have, because 2,800 years is just a big bite to take, and I didn't know if I'm not quite sure, myself. I'm still kind of throwing it back and forth. Is it possible? Is it not? But I can definitely hear what you say about the programming and worrying that if you expect to live 100 years, there's no reason why your body would not follow along with that programmed reality that you've given it and give you exactly what you asked for. So.
Well, I have a good example of that. Maybe it will help you answer several of those kind of points you made. Sure. When I was growing up, we would frequently have, I grew up in a traditional Midwest household, traditional family, traditional education, and so I grew up with a very skeptical mind. My background is in the hard sciences, so I was very much, I would say, a closed-minded person up to a certain point in time. And as I was growing up, my parents would often barbecue, and I would run across the yard. And I remember distinctly a couple of times running across the yard, and there'd be a small pea-size coal that had popped out from the family grill. And even though it was covered up with grass, I severely burned the bottom of my feet. Well, fast forward to the early 80s, and on a bet, I got invited to a Tony Robbins seminar. And I don't know if you're familiar with Tony Robbins seminars, but at the end of the night, they would comment. Are you still there?
Yeah.
We're here.
Okay. At the end of the night, they would commonly have what's called a firewalk. Well, Mr. Skeptical Scientist here had to go up there and check this out. I wasn't going to necessarily walk barefoot on hot coals, but I wanted to check this out. And I tell you, it was a real live barbecue going on there. In fact, I put my hand near one of the coals and actually singed the hair on the back of my hand. So I was sitting there observing 200 people go through this firewalk, 3-4 steps at a time, and no one was burning their feet. And so Mr. Macho here decided I better give it a try myself. And then just before I got to the coals, Tony said, "Wait a minute, I don't want to deny you this experience." He bought in a brand new, fresh set of coals just before I walked barefoot on the coals. And I actually walked four steps on these hot coals. I did not burn my feet. In fact, one of the coals got stuck between my toes, and they had to remove it with, they had some kind of a metal pliers to remove it so they didn't burn me. And so I'm sitting there in a state of shock, realizing that all my concepts from science and religion have all changed in one fell swoop there, and realized that there's much more to life that's not explained to us. And so I believe that's what changed my paradigm of life and opened me up to the fact that some of this paranormal phenomenon that exists among us is possible. And that's what gave me one of many opportunities in life to open myself up to the possibility that these people do exist. And that's kind of how I led me on this path to believing that they do and are living among us.
We have a question out of the chat room that I wanted to share with you, Ben. I don't think we touched on it. What kind of life, as far as companionship, has this gentleman lived? Has he had, has he been married tons of times? Has he had tons of children in his lifetime? Or did he spend a lot of time alone? Or can you tell us a little bit about that?
The gentleman we talked about that was 256 years of age had about 20 to 30 wives and outlived them all pretty much. He was living with his, I think it was a 35th wife at the time that he died. This gentleman's have hundreds of wives. In fact, he's kind of lost track of them. So he's had many lives, and he considers procreation a very part of his longevity. And that currently his wife has recently passed away, but he still has a son who looks almost as old as he does, and a granddaughter who I got a chance to see, or the son I got a chance to see. And it's amazing that he's got children. I think he gets to the point where the children start to die off, and that's when he picks up stakes and moves to another part of the Mediterranean and starts life all over again.
Right. Well, hey,
go ahead.
David, real quick, I just want to point something out because my wife is listening. Ben, can you say it one more time that he believes that procreation is part of his longevity? Could you just say that so she hears it too?
He definitely believes that procreation is part of his human longevity and allowed him to live as long as he has. And one of the things I'm going to try to do next time I go visit him is find out how a 2,800-year-old man picks up chicks. You know, obviously he's marrying childbearing women, so they must be a lot younger than what he appears to be.
But one point Mrs. Gates is going to hit you with later on is that this man has outlived 230 wives. So if you're looking to use that for any kind of point, I mean,
there's a couple of
points. Of course, there's a point, but you know, she could have the honor of setting me on that long path, David.
I hear you, man. I hear you. Seriously though, all these questions about procreation, do these people, the immortals, do they contribute any of their longevity to genetic, or is it just purely the stance that they have taken in their mind?
Well, that's one of the excellent questions I was trying to investigate, and I asked him if any of his children actually had lived, you know, are still alive today and immortal, and he said that one of his children actually lived to 250 years of age, but that was the oldest. Most of them live the typical lives that we are. So to me, he's either extreme biological anomaly or it's part of his belief system. And I believe it's the latter, that it's a belief system that if we incorporate, we can all live as long as he has. And I just find it difficult to believe it's purely genetic from what the evidence I found so far. It's still possible, but I just think it's the possibility is so small that it's not likely. That's what it is.
Okay, there are gender issues being brought up. The immortals that you have met, are more of them men or more of them women? Is it biased in one way or the other?
Well, this is one of the biggest shockers that I found in my research. Typically, in our society, women outlive men. It's been a norm for many, many years. However, the 25 immortals that I found that are 250 years of age or older are all men. I have no explanation for it other than that maybe men are just too dang stubborn to die. Other than that, the oldest woman I could find is about 160 years of age, living in I think it's a northern India area. I just don't know why that is. I can only speculate. I believe that men and women can live as long as they so choose, and it's typical that a woman does outlive men. But for whatever reason, these immortals seem to be all men.
I would guess that there are a lot of other cultural things that are factoring in on that, because you know in Japan and some places over there they really like to have male children, and it's been that way for so long that their population is primarily male, you know. So I don't think that has anything to do with the immortality issue.
Exactly, that's kind of what I think it is. But also too, maybe it's to do with the emotional level. I just don't know. I can only speculate what the reason is. I was very shocked to find that out because, again, I'm in my society that I live in here in the United States. Women usually outlive the men.
Right.
Speaking of the United States, you kind of hinted around a little bit to us that there about someone in the U.S. that you found that you believe to be the oldest person. Can you tell us about that person just a little bit?
Yes, a couple. According to some of my friends, there is a gentleman living in Arizona right now that they believe is about 150 to possibly 160 years of age. Mm-hmm. He's a Native American who they claim they saw a wanted poster back from the 1800s where he was a young man on this wanted poster. I believe I found him. I haven't interviewed him yet, and I'm in the process of making contact with him and just to find out more about him. It's ironic that there's a lot of information about him on the internet. I was, to my surprise, this wasn't the gentleman I looked for him quite a bit on the internet, couldn't find anything, and then one of my fans said, well, look at this link, and sure enough, there was some information that definitely relates to what my friends were telling me. So again, without getting too far ahead of myself, I believe there is somebody in Arizona about the 150-year time frame, and the information on the website I found so far kind of relates to that.
Well, I'm fairly certain that he doesn't eat a Mediterranean diet. So
no.
Do you have any do you have any clues as to why he has lived so long?
No, but I know on the website he talks about selling herbs.
Herbs. Okay.
Yeah, and this Li Ching Young was an herbalist. That was his occupation. So maybe it's something to do with the herbs. There was a point that you mentioned earlier. I was going to bring up, and I just slipped my mind for a moment. But shoot, something was a really good point I wanted to talk about as far as. I'll have to let it go. Go ahead with your next question. I'll think of it again here.
Mm-hmm.
I apologize.
Again, for those of us out there who are just joining us, we're talking about a person, presumably who has seen more history than many of our books can accurately detail. Again, it's just mind-blowing to me. I'm not one to believe that anything is impossible, because I've seen things in my life that keep making me question what is impossible. I just get back to this guy. I just wish I could kind of get into his brain and just see, just kind of go through the things that he's seen and how he's reacted to them. He's from an area where people were persecuted at one time, and he's seen a lot of evils in the world, and he's seen a lot of good things in the world. Did he mention perhaps what's some of the greatest things that he has personally seen our kind do, and perhaps the worst day of our lives?
Well, definitely his encounter with Jesus Christ was a big part of his life, and as he talks about his experiences, it was quite emotional about it, and he felt like it was very attached. He's been very much impressed with the train systems. I asked him what was the most impressive thing that he's seen as far as technology improvements is concerned, and that was the number one was the train system. The number two thing was air conditioning. He thought that was phenomenal. He just recently got he just recently got a television set. I don't know if that's a good or bad thing. He didn't say about that. And I was talking or interviewing him one day, and it was a time when there was a shooting war going on in Lebanon at the time, and he mentioned he was extremely sad about it. He was watching this on TV. He was extremely sad by it because he felt he had descendants on both sides of the battle, and it really distressed him quite a bit that here some of his descendants may actually be killing each other for he thought for ridiculous reasons. So there's something of the good and the bad. A good little tidbit.
So I feel like we're approaching areas where you would rather not have us tread. So I'll just leave it open to you. Is there anything that you've missed? Any information that you can give us? Talk about that you haven't said and we hadn't thought to ask you about.
Oh, there's so much. We just kind of barely touched on some of the highlights. Let's talk a little bit more about some of his beliefs and his programming on extending our lives. There was quite a few things that I thought were really incredible that he taught me, and one of them is this was something I've now embraced in my own life is the fact that he makes it a point to spend at least one meal a day with another human being. And we all have a need for human interaction once in a while, and it's pretty obvious that this gentleman doesn't live in a cave, and obviously he's raised families and such. But I started thinking as I was listening and talking with him that perhaps there's more to life than just eating food, that there's more to that he actually needs human companionship, not only just for the conversation, but for possibly, we are energy beings, and there's possibility there's exchange of energy that it nourishes our body as well. So I started thinking realizing that all of us have these auras, and that this energy that we exchange with each other may be helping each other out physically, emotionally, and spiritually. And he made it a point that that's a very important part of his life. And in my own life, I've noticed that there's people that you just feel good when you're next to these people, and there's some people you just can't get away from them fast enough. And so, and this particular gentleman is one of those people that you can feel this energy emanating from them. It's very strong and very positive and loving, caring energy, and it's a very attractive energy. And I believe that when people like that, you're around them, you just feel better. It makes you, and you can't explain it other than there's something about their energy. Clearly, the programming that we're talking about as far as your belief system, I tell people one way to start on the road of becoming an immortal and extending our lives is just start out every day and say, I'm an immortal. That simple act right there starts your whole being on the road to making subtle changes in your life. And I firmly believe if we state to the universe what we want, God, the Creator, everybody's out there, all the spiritual beings are listening, and they're going to say, oh, he wants to do this, then let's give it to him. And so you always hear in life that only certain things in life are death and taxes. Well, if you can just say certain things in life are taxes and not say death, you might notice that you'll get the taxes, but you won't get the certain thing in death, And I noticed as I started incorporating this in my life, my language patterns have changed, and I just it's not I'll die for a chocolate cupcake or a piece of pie. It's I'll live for a chocolate cupcake. I'll live longer for a piece of pie, and things like that I've noticed I've incorporated into my life in my own language patterns. And as I started saying this, I'm an immortal every day, I noticed my diet started getting a little bit better, and I started eating a little healthier and looking for and craving the little healthier foods. And I also noticed these gentlemen, these people, they have low stressful lives, and I'm in a very stressful occupation. So as I started incorporating their teachings into my life, the amount of stress has started to reduce. I'm now seeking and making better choices to get less stress into my life, doing activities that reduce my stress and not increase my stress. Jumping out of a plane is for people that need to increase their stress. It doesn't reduce a lot of people's stress. But, sometimes meditating, listening to nice quiet music, that's a good way to reduce your stress, or looking for ways to supplement your income less stressfully than working as a consultant. Mm-hmm. Different things like that are part of the programming I noticed. And again, they all had a very strong belief system in the Creator, and I firmly believe that if they didn't have a belief in the Creator, there to protect them and part of their relationship, they'd all become roadkill in history somewhere along the line. It's very obvious, and I'll give you a couple of stories to follow up if we have time. Well, we're getting closer, but if we had time, where this gentleman is very clear to him that he has spiritual protection, and it's pretty obvious when you're near these type of guru people that they do have spiritual protection. And I believe that's part of what allows them to survive. Is you need more than just be at the right place at the right time, but you need somebody there that just kind of watches out for you and make sure you're at the right place at the right time. And I think that's part of what it is. It isn't that they're bulletproof, but they'll avoid the bullets. They won't be there where the risk is so great. And I think that's what the example of World War II brought to me was he was at the right place at the right time to get the less chances of getting involved in the war. And that's what like his whole life's been that way.
It's a good point, because I was going to ask you, for someone to program themselves, and I'm totally on board with programming, because many of the states that, and I don't mean state as in Tennessee, but many of the states that we find ourselves in life is due to our own bad programming. So I really can resonate with that. But what I was going to ask you was, it's one thing to control our own thoughts and control what we do. It's awful hard to control somebody else's that has a gun, or a knife, or a sword, or a stick, or whatever. So, I think you kind of touched upon that. He talked about taxes. After 2,800 years, I think I'd get sick of paying taxes.
Oh, yeah. But the thing is, one of the things you can do, too, is like I kind of joked about is, I think I calculated one time if I lived to 125, it's probably going to be 145 right now, I'll get all my money I paid in taxes back through Social Security, and if there is such a thing in 50 years from now, Social Security, But the thing is that it's pretty obvious if you make some minor investment now, 100 years from now, it's going to start paying off pretty good, and to a point where, you're going to have investments to live on. You're going to be able to be pretty well taken care of after 100 or 200 years of investing wisely. And so, yes, you may be paying some taxes, but you're going to end up you have enough money where you don't care about the taxes anymore.
Well, do you care if I ask you a hardball question?
Go ahead.
Put you right on the spot. Okay.
Sure.
Have you put your money where your mouth is with life insurance? Do you have any?
I do not have life insurance.
There you go.
I think there's a couple of loans that I've had taken in the past where they kind of make you take life insurance. I think it was something to do with like my car loan. I remember something like that. But for the most part, I've dropped my life insurance, and I dropped my daily what do we call it? I have a health savings account type of a health insurance. So I still have one in case I break a leg or get in an accident, but I don't have it takes care of like the daily diseases or any of that kind of stuff.
Oh, okay. I was just wondering else. That came up as a question. I was just sitting here thinking, how serious does he take this within himself? And that was a good point to kind of split the hair on, because a lot of people say one thing and then they actually do another.
Exactly. And you brought up a good point. Our whole society is, designed around the practice of us dying at an early age. We talk about funeral parlors, even the churches. A lot of that has to do with the fear of death, and that's why people use that. And of course, life insurance, health insurance. We've got all sorts of. Even the government is predicting that we're going to die at a certain age. That's again, we talked about Social Security. So if I started focusing on life, these things became less of an issue. Some people buy their plot and their casket ahead of time. I haven't done that. I just decided it wasn't. I was about that part of my life where I was thinking about that, and then this incredible phenomenon came in my life, and I said, I don't need it because I'm going to outlive these people anyway, and who knows what. So I've chosen not to take that path, and this is what So yes, I believe that's true. If you don't walk the talk, why bother talking?
That's another point that could spin us off for 10 hours, right, David?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it could.
I don't want to get too personal, Ben, but your family around you, have you been sharing these types of things with them? How are they receiving this information? Trying to prolong our lives as long as we wish, and that will only go when we feel like it.
Well, that's a very good question, because I mentioned earlier my walk on barefoot on hot coals. Most of my family and many of my friends still don't believe it's possible to walk barefoot on hot coals. I've invited them to come with me to another Tony Robbins seminar, and they just give an excuse not to show up. So that tells me right there they're just not going to be open to the point of anything else that type.
Right.
So I would say very few personal family members and friends have embraced this possibility. However, other new friends and some other people that I did have friends and a few relatives have embraced it. In fact, they come forward and said, "Would you tell us about this?" And then I'm also involved with the alternate health phenomenon that's taking shape here in the United States. And I'm surprised at how many people are coming to me and asking me advice about alternate health. What herb I've heard that does this, and what have I heard about that? And it's so I've kind of like I'm beginning to grow a new family, so to speak, of families and friends. But it's just difficult to convince everyone in my own personal life of this, but they are coming along. I notice there's a few that are kind of thinking, well, this is interesting. I think when I start, outliving and they turn gray and white and start, falling apart, their bodies start falling apart, and I'm still around kicking their butt once in a while, especially the younger brothers, I think that's when they're going to start changing their tune a little bit.
For everyone who's interested, I've posted the link to secretsofimmortal.com in the chat room. For those of you who are listening and aren't with us in the chat room, that's secrets-of-immortal.com. I'm there now. There's tons of information. There's stuff, it just sucks that we only have 2 hours to talk about this because, there's just so much more that we could do. Hopefully we can get you back on.
Yes, we didn't barely touch on the one of my advanced researching tools, which some people are really fascinated in, called remote viewing. That's one of the tools I use to find these incredible people, and that's a whole show in itself, talking about remote viewing and how I learned that technique. And again, that another paradigm was broken when I had a chance to sit in front of Major Ed Danes and learn that skill, and it was quite an adventure, and it was one of the major tools I needed to find these people with and to verify their existence.
A lot of folks always attribute stuff for like martial arts in the East for these types of attributes, people living a long time. So, it really resonates what you've been saying. I don't think you get too many people to argue with you about that.
Well, there's, again, some of these immortals that I was finding were actually monks in various Tibetan or Chinese or Indian monasteries. But, again, the most extraordinary gentleman of them all was living in an urban city along the Mediterranean Sea, which I found totally amazing.
We customarily always ask our guests we give them the opportunity to plug their work and talk about who they are, what they're doing, and leave the final statement that they would like for all the listeners to take home. So if you could go ahead and give that out, and we'll wrap this show up.
Well, thank you again for a wonderful show, and it was definitely fun, and it went by really fast. I have to admit that. And again, we just barely touched on the tip of the iceberg on this subject material. My main website is benabba.com, benabba.com. SecretsofanImmortal.com is where I sell taking pre-orders for my book, Secrets of an Immortal, an eyewitness account of 2,800 years of history. And if you buy the pre-order of the book, you'll get the e-book and the copy of Wake Up Moments of Inspiration, which is out right now. You'll get that for free, in addition to the hardcover of the book when it's finally published. And right now I'm focusing on getting the book out and getting that done. It's in the editing phases right now, and enjoying making contact with these incredible people. I'm trying to track down another one who's approximately 2,800 years of age, I believe is out there. I had a couple of encounters with this gentleman, but I don't have enough information to confirm exactly how old he is and his life story. So I'm in the process of chasing him down. And again, there's a gentleman in Arizona I'm trying to chase down. It's about, I believe, to be the oldest American alive. So that's what I have for what I'm up to. And again, thank you for a great evening, and blessings to you and to all your audience for a wonderful interview.